Welcome to Death Care Collective. I'm Keith and I'm the host of the show. My guest today is Kim Eazell. Kim's a do-it-all at El Toro Memorial Park, also known as El Toro Memorial Cemetery in South Orange County. We have a great conversation. She is fascinating and is what is called a graver. And I've never met a graver before. And I don't know if you have or not either, but you're gonna, I think, find her very interesting. So enjoy the show. All right. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Keith, and I'm here with Kim Eazell. Kim, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us on the show. It's great to have you. I know you're at, what's that?
I said it's a pleasure. So.
Cool. I know you're there at El Toro Memorial Park. I've been there often when I was a celebrant at South Orange County. But tell everybody what El Toro Memorial Park is and what you do there.
I'm the cemetery assistant to the cemetery manager, and we're a county cemetery. So we are about affordable burial. We're one of the least expenses in the county and some of the nicest parks that we have in the county. So
wow. How many parks does Orange County have?
Currently, we have 3. We have El Toro, Anaheim Cemetery, Santa Ana Cemetery, and the Gypsum Canyon Memorial Park is in the process right now. It's supposed to be open in 2028. So
love that. What was your? We're gonna have 2 backstories. One will be kind of how you got to there at El Toro, but I know way before El Toro, you had an early, interest, curiosity around death and or cemeteries. Tell me and us about that. Where'd that come? How old were you, and how did that originate?
Well, I would have been 28 years old. It was 1988, and I just happened to be up in Hollywood with my ex-husband, and we drove past Hollywood Forever, and I've been. Well, it was Hollywood Cemetery back then, but I'd been so fascinated with Marilyn Monroe. I thought she was buried there. And we pulled in and saw people walking around with maps with, celebrity graves on it. So that's kind of how I started. Unbeknownst to me, Marilyn Monroe is not there, but Rudolph Valentino and Douglas Fairbanks are. And then it just kind of grew from there. It was like, okay, wonder where this one's buried. Wonder where that one's buried. So that's kind of how the love of going and visiting cemeteries. And as I'm getting older, it's more like I like going and looking at the cemetery and not who's buried there. So it's kind of nice to go and see, headstones and monuments and, so.
Right. So that was when you were 28. 2 questions about that. One was when you guys pulled in there, did you know that there was a whole fascination already by
no, not at all.
You didn't? You hadn't heard that? Okay.
And then a couple weeks later, we were down we were up on Hollywood Boulevard walking around, and I found a book. God, I forget what the name of that book is, because every one of us that are fascinated with cemeteries, almost all of us own it. I think I have 3 copies of it. And it has cemeteries in it with, where the famous are buried. And it has like little walking maps in it. It's very rough because it doesn't have a lot of people in there, but it was one of the ones, and that's how I found Maryland. And the first time I went out to Westwood, I got down to the end and walked around the corner, and I just kind of stood there and I was like, wow, I mean, I couldn't meet her. I mean, she died when I was 2 years old, but I couldn't physically meet her, but I could be within a few feet of her. So
so interesting.
So,
well, we'll get to where I want to talk more about that subculture. But prior to, so that was at age 28. Prior to that, as a kid, did you remember having any interest in cemeteries, or even how were you introduced to death? Did you have grandparents who died or animals who died?
I had an uncle that died when I was 8 years old, and he's up at Rose Hills. And my mom was quite devastated over losing her brother because he had lung cancer, in his 40s. And he's buried up at Rose Hill. So that was really the first time I had any kind of instances. But as a kid, you think death is a scary thing because of scary movies. And, I wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. And, and then, of course, every time we would drive by Rose Hills, my dad would say, look, kids, guess what? People are dying to get in there. You know, like the movie,
Total dad joke.
National Lampoon movie, like, look, kids, Big Ben. So
Right.
my dad was always the joker about it. So,
Huh.
you know,
Yeah.
and my grandparents, I was 24 when my grandmother passed, and then 28 when my grandfather passed, and I was almost 40 when my other grandmother passed. So I was
Okay.
one of the lucky ones that got to spend more time with a grandparent than, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Huh.
but by the time I was 40, death didn't bother me, you know. So it was kind of, you
Right.
know, I'd been hanging out in the cemeteries for a while. So, but
So you know, I would guess like if I talk to most 28-year-olds today, maybe not all of them, but you know, they may or may not be. I would be curious about how many of them would be either afraid of death or dying. But if I said, "Hey, would you want to go find out where a famous person is in a cemetery?" The fact that it's a cemetery, like they might be interested in the famous person, but the fact that it was a cemetery might still freak them out. But for you, it wasn't that.
no.
It
And then
was
I met others that did the same thing that I
right,
did, you know.
right.
So it's like, and almost now it's like you go out to Westwood and you see people walking around, and I kind of go over and I go, "Who are you looking for?" Because I know where they are. So,
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
Yeah, now you're like a tour guide.
yeah.
So where did
So
that fascination at 28? How soon were you starting to visit them, and how often were you visiting cemeteries? And was this became a regular thing?
it became a weekend obsession. It was like I would get up in the morning on a Saturday morning, and we had cameras back then, so we were, you know,
Right.
shooting film.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes your film, you know, had to be careful with what you were, you know. And then 2 years after I started, I went to New York and met a friend and stayed with him, and we went and hit all the cemeteries in New York. And so I
Really?
got to see Judy Garland in New York, and now she's buried out here.
Oh,
So I've
really? They transitioned her.
seen her in
What's that
both
called? Is that called a transfer?
places. So yeah, well, they just interred her and brought her to California. So at the
Okay.
time that she was married, you know, of course, you know that the husband is the next of kin. So the
Right.
girls, you know, her two daughters and her son had no say in it.
Right.
So then when he died, the girls and Joey Manelli decided to transfer out here. So she has her whole little pavilion room at the Hollywood Forever. So
Really?
supposedly they
I
just,
forgot. And is she Liza Minnelli's mom?
yeah.
And then was Liza
Judy Garland, Liza Minnelli, Lorna
right?
Luft, and I think it's Joey Luft was
And it
his
was
name.
is Liza? I know Liza died. Is she buried out there, or is
No,
Liza still
Liza's
alive?
still alive. She just did a live show last
Oh
night.
my gosh.
Yeah, because she wrote a book and she did a live show last night. So
Okay.
some of my friends were at it. So
Sorry, Liza. If you're watching, I apologize.
there's every once in a while you see an obituary and you think, I thought they already died, you know. But
Right.
there's so many of them, celebrities that are up in their 90s and their hundreds, and you know, so
So once you discovered you could do this, right? And this is still a lot of this is obviously pre-internet, as far as you couldn't just do a quick Google search to find out. So you've kind of having to talk to other people, get this book. It's probably kind of an underground thing.
when I met my friend Roger Sinclair, he had the Variety obituaries. They would put out every year. They would put all the obituaries that were in the Variety magazine into an obituary book, and of course, I have all of those now that he left
Wow.
me. But they'd at least have the city they died in. So, being that I lived in Orange County, I would go to the Orange County courthouse and look up the death certificate to see where they were buried at.
No
So,
way.
and then when I lived in San Diego County for a couple of years, I hit the San Diego County courthouse. So LA County courthouse was too hard to, you know, a lot of
Navigate.
times they'd only give you one or two death certificates you could look at, and I'd go in there with a list, you know. So,
Yeah. So
but
the first person obviously was Marilyn Monroe. And once you found out you could start to search, who was the one that you really were the most excited to find? Was there
most
one?
probably was probably Maryland. So
Okay,
because I was
after
such
Maryland. Once you knew the search was on and you could do it, who was number two?
I couldn't tell you. And I
Okay,
worked, you know, I worked at Pacific View where we had John Wayne. I
yeah.
worked at, you know, I worked at Westminster. We had quite a few. We have a few here at El Toro, so.
Yeah. Okay.
But one of my friends started calling me the graving queen of Orange County because if they were famous and they were buried in Orange County, I knew where they were. So
I love that. So what is it? What they call you? The graving queen?
The graving queen of Orange County.
Graving, like graving being a verb. You're graving. Yeah. And what's the feeling when you somebody's there, you're going out and you're finding their grave and you're sitting there? What's the feeling? Is it closeness? Is it fascination? Is it warmth? What's the feeling for you personally?
Well, it's you just some of these celebrities, they don't have, they've been dead for years and they don't have a lot of people that come by and visit them. And to me, it's like, you're thinking about that person when you go visit them, almost like you're bringing them back to life for a little bit, so. But, awesome. There's been some that I've been sent out to and I'm like, who the heck is this person, so, and then I have to go back home and look. And my friend Roger was he was so quirky. He'd go, you don't know who this is? He was in this silent film movie in the 1920s. And I'm like, no, do you realize how old I am?
Right.
I didn't see, so.
Right. Before my time, Roger.
But, he'd always made such a big deal. Roger was quite the character. So, we call him the godfather of graving because that's what he did. Wow. He got himself locked inside the mausoleum at Hollywood Forever.
On purpose or accident?
On purpose, so that he could look for somebody. So he spent a couple of nights in those mausoleums. He's talked his way into funerals, to celebrity funerals. He walked right into Sammy Davis Jr.'s funeral, Rita Hayworth's funeral. So he called a mortuary one time when Robert Carradine died, or John Carradine, the dad. Okay. And he called the mortuary and pretended he was this agent or whatever, and he was trying to find out where the service was going to be. And they handed the phone to David Carradine. And so he had to lie through his behind, and he finally told him, oh, no, we're going to scatter him out by Catalina. So,
oh, my Lord.
I was like, you're going to get into trouble doing that kind of stuff, but he loved it. So
yeah. When we talked last time, you used the term, I hope it's not derogatory, death hag.
Right. And that's my friend Scott Michael started that.
Okay, what's a death hag?
Well, it's just people that have a love for the cemeteries.
Okay, so it's
basically, we're just, because Scott started Find a Death, because there's Find a Grave, which we all know Jim Tipton. We used to submit pictures to him back before you could scan them and put them in there. So we used to mail him pictures, and it would take him several months before he would attach them on his thing. And Find a Grave originally started as celebrities, and then, of course, all the genealogists kind of, clutched onto it, and a lot of people have found their families through there. But Scott started Find a Death. So, and then he also started the Dearly Departed tours in Hollywood. So he would take you to the places where the famous passed. So, it might be a street corner where somebody was killed, or he'd take you by the La Bianca house. He's quite the authority on Manson. So, but he's the one that coined the phrase death hag. So I still have his license plate cover on my car. Every once in a while, somebody goes, "What's a death hag?" So.
Right. So it didn't take long once you heard the term, you're like, "Oh yeah, I am one."
Yeah, well, there was a lot of us who were like, we're the original death hags.
Yeah, the OGs
out there now. So, but
yeah, so that's very fun. What else? What's a question about being a death hag or doing graving that maybe I should ask that I don't even know? I haven't thought about it enough or haven't done it, so I'm not even sure a good question to ask around it. But what else can you tell? What if somebody's interested in it? Where could they start? How about that?
Start on Find a Grave. If you're looking for somebody, it's more than likely it's on Find a Grave. And then there's all kinds of groups on Facebook. So back in the 90s, Karen McHale started a group called the Hollywood Underground, and it was through a Yahoo group before Facebook came out.
Okay.
So there was a lot of us that and Karen was like, let's all get together. So we all went up to to um, Forest Lawn in Hollywood Hills and all met up there and kind of got to know each other. And then a couple of years down the line, she's like, well, we should have a dinner. So we started having an annual dinner, and people were flying in from all over the place. They were coming from the East Coast and Canada, you know. And then once she stopped doing the dinners, then Scott picked it up through the Dearly Departed group. And then some of his people that were his fans came too. So a lot of us know each other through that. And, you know, we share information, and some of my friends have written books, and, you know, so, and we've lost a few along the way. We lost a really close friend. Mark Masick died a few months ago. He died New Year's Eve. So, you know, it's and Karen has since passed. So, you know, so.
Do you think that group of people are more prepared for each other dying because of the conversations and all the time in cemeteries? Does that prepare us better?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. I mean, I was kind of, you know, skeptical or scared of death myself until I actually got in the industry, you know. So, and I think now I'm more at peace with, you know, that's eventually going to happen. We're all going to, you know, death and taxes, right? So
that's right. Talk to us about how you got then into the actual industry, because at 28, you weren't yet, that probably wasn't on your bingo card that you were going to one day work at a cemetery.
No, because I had done a lot of administrative work. I had worked for a pet supply company. I worked for an automotive parts company. I did commercial finance for a while. I took some time off when my daughters were young. I took 5 years off, and I sold Tupperware for a living. And I would go, my husband would come home, he'd walk in the door, dinner was on the table, and I went out the door to do a party. So then once I went back to work part-time. I worked for a forensic psychologist who did work comp, and I worked for her for part-time for a while. And then a friend of mine told me that the Crystal Cathedral was hiring an admin for their cemetery. So I went in and interviewed, and I got the job, and I spent 3 months there. And at my 90 days, I was called in and told that, oh, you just, you know, you don't have the administrative skills to stay here. Although I was teaching the director how to use Excel and Word. So, but it was her polite way of saying I didn't fit in, because a lot of these people were very, they honored Dr. Schuler very well. Most of the women in that office were my mother's age. So, you know. And then I went to an agency to try to help find a job, and they called me and said, hey, we have a job at Pacific View, which is one of my favorite cemeteries in Orange County. So I went in and interviewed, and I guess knocked the general manager off her feet, and they hired me, and I started in the accounting department. And then once I was in that position for about a year, and our sales manager came over and asked if I wanted to come to work for him. So I worked with the family service and community service, you know, because they were the ones that sold the cemetery property. So I took care of all the sales department, and then I eventually went to Westminster, because I did 6 years at Pacific View. I did 5 at Westminster. And then when we moved to the Inland Empire for my husband's job, I tried my hand at sales and went, no, I just am not in trying to sell people stuff that they
be the closer of a sales experience.
I don't like that. And I had to go find my leads, and it was like, you know, I didn't like pounding on doors and doing, you know, marketplaces, and, you know, they put us in the mall, and, you know, so, but then I went to work for a mortuary, and I found my niche as an arranger. So, and I really loved it. I really love working with the families and hearing their stories, and, you know, just taking care of them, because it's the worst time of your life, you know, is when you lose a loved one.
So what is a typical day there now at El Toro? Are you still, you said you're like the assistant?
Well, they've started, the gal that sits in the reception area, she's also known as the cemetery assistant. So I'm assistant to the manager, and I do pre-need and at-need meetings. Usually I do a 9 a.m. and a 3 o'clock, or 9:30 and a 3 o'clock. And I take them out and show them property in the cemetery, and then come back and do all their arrangements, coordinate with the mortuary, you know, get my paperwork out to go to my crew to dig the grave, and, you know, it's all collected from there. And we all checks and balances back and forth with the boss. So, And then I've become the chaos coordinator. So
Okay.
if anything happens in this office, they come talk to me.
Yeah.
Just like my friends, all of my Facebook friends, and people I went to high school with, and people will call me, go, "My mom just died. What do I do?" And I've been able to give them some recommendations for mortuaries and cemeteries, and
That's great. I bet
so
you can bring a lot of comfort for people because of your know-how, your knowledge, and then your compassion. And I bet you are a warm presence for them when they call you in the midst of a loss. I bet that's just really,
and
really
that's what I love about my job. I love when a family says, "You've made this so easy," or
yeah.
you've
Yep.
made me feel more at ease. So, girl this morning said, I appreciate you being honest with me, because I mean,
Huh.
that you go to a big cemetery or a corporate cemetery and they lock you in a room and they needle you down and sell you stuff sometimes you don't need.
Yeah.
So, and I get it. It's a business and they
Sure.
are commissioned employees and,
Yep. Yeah.
so,
Right.
you know.
What do you feel like over the years being in the industry, as long as you have, does it feel like you've become numb, or has it hardened you at all, or do you still feel as tender and caring towards these families?
Well, I've always had a heart of gold. That's why my mom was always like she couldn't understand why I do what I do, and she says
Yeah.
you've got a heart of gold, and and
Yeah.
it's been tough since June because my mother passed away. So
Okay.
it's been hard to grieve for her
Yeah.
because I'm and I heard Anderson Cooper say this because he has a series on grief.
Yep. I've listened to
And
the whole thing.
I've listened to almost all of them. And
Yep. Me
Anderson
too.
Cooper said it right. I step into their grief every day.
Yeah.
And it's been hard to process my own grief.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. When
So,
I first started as a celebrant in 2014, my dad had died in '09, and then my mom in 2012. And so here it was, 2 years later when O'Connor started using me as a celebrant. And I found that it was a place where my grief and the family's grief could find some communion together. Now
yeah,
I
we could
didn't,
put a piece together. So,
and I didn't share that I was in grief, of course, but I just felt like I was still very tender hearted, right? And my
yeah.
grief was tender, my heart was tender because I was still walking in fairly new in the loss of both parents. And so I had a lot of compassion, and it felt kindred. There was a kindred about it, right? A depth
Right.
that I was like, oh, these people, without me even saying anything, because they're in grief and my grief's meaning their grief, and it really feels like a special time over the course of, usually I had about one appointment a week, but it was kind of a wonderful quiet joy of just knowing that there was some place where that my hurt and their hurt was kind of meeting. So yeah, I can see
Yeah,
that.
I came back. I took the week off after my mom passed away. My sister and I were working on cleaning the house out, and I came back to work on Monday, and on Tuesday I had both of my appointments were two women who lost their mothers the same day my mom died. And I spent more time with them because we sat here and cried together and just,
Sure.
told stories
Oh
about
yeah.
our moms. And it just broke my heart to see these two women that they both lost their mother the same day. And it
Yeah.
was very cathartic too. It kind
Right.
of,
Yeah.
I went home and told my husband, I said, it just made me feel better. And I have shared with people when they come in and their mom's passed, I'm so sorry. I just lost my mom in June. I
Yep.
know how you feel, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's the one with kids that it just
Uh,
breaks my heart because I don't know how it feels to lose a child.
right.
And there's just nothing you can say.
Right. Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
heard a funeral director, this gal on TikTok that I follow, then she said that if you don't know what to say to somebody, just shut the hell up. And that's what I tell people. It's like, just be
Mhm.
quiet. Just
Yeah.
ask them, what do you need? I'm here.
Yep. That's right.
And
That's
that's all you can do. Because,
yeah.
I had somebody say to me that, oh, your mom's in a better place. And I thought, and she's a psychologist. And I thought, oh my God, that's like the worst thing you can say to
Yeah.
somebody.
Right. Yeah.
So,
There's a whole list of things not to say.
yeah,
Um, and you're right. I always say our presence is really the best gift, right? Um,
right. I'd
and I
rather
think,
have her here than somewhere else.
yeah, right.
So,
Um, Well, that's what a special thing that you get to do and hold space for. So yeah, so are they when they're coming to a cemetery? I guess they're still having to go because you guys don't do the mortuary side of it. So I
Right.
forget, I've helped O'Connor with the mortuary side a bit, and I know that those arrangers they're meeting with families all the time. But that's right, the family then not only maybe has to do the mortuary visit, but then they're coming over to see you or vice versa.
Right.
So there's two visits the families are
Yeah,
making.
we're not like a combo like Pacific View or
Right,
Westminster or Fairhaven, Harbor Lawn. They're
right,
they're a combo where they go from the mortuary counselor to the family service counselor. So,
right.
here we're just like the family service counselor,
Yeah, just handling the internments, the burials,
just
and
handling the grave, handling the
right,
burial. Can people will ask, well, how do we do this or how do we do that? Well, no, the mortuary conducts your service.
right, right.
Once we're ready to bury, the mortuary will tell us, okay, we're ready to bury.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Do you ever get?
So,
Have you ever had a family come in, and yes, they're obviously grieving, but there's a family member or the family actually has a more of a curiosity side of the cemetery, or they're able to maybe they're distracted or they're nervous and they want to talk more about are there ghosts at the cemetery or they or
I
most
get that all
almost
the time.
100% always really.
Yeah, I have people all the time say, is this place
We've got your your
haunted? I'm
connection's
like,
breaking up.
well, I
Kim, your
don't know. I
connection.
haven't seen anything. Nobody that's here sees anything. We have this rumor about the blue lady here has seen her. So
Yeah. Hey, is my connection okay
well,
over
it
there?
shows I'm fine. Yeah,
Is
you're
our
freezing every once in a while.
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
So are you. I don't know what's up with that. This is the first time that's happened. So maybe us talking about ghosts and cemeteries. It's
Yeah. It haunted my laptop.
right. So do you
Yeah,
think
I know when I worked at Pacific View, the girls said that some of the girls there had some instances where they would lock up the building and leave, and as they were driving down the driveway, they would see lights come back on. And then there
no?
was one couple of times where somebody said they think there was a little girl in there because they tug on their hair. So,
Yeah,
but I'm intuitive to that stuff, but I've never witnessed any of it. In all the
right.
cemeteries I've been in, and all the mortuaries, and all the mausoleums. Now, I used to be scared to death to go into a mausoleum by myself. I
Yeah,
would only go in there if I had somebody with me, but it doesn't
right.
bother me anymore. So,
Yeah. You guys have gates and stuff, so you can't get looky-loos at night and after hours at the
no,
cemetery, can you?
no, we have a security crew that closes the gates well, we just started daylight savings time, so we close at 7.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
Huh.
the guys usually open the gates 6 days a week, and then security opens on Sunday. So,
Yeah.
no.
What's the thing that maybe families should know or be prepared for or understand about that family meeting? They're going to come in and see you, and there's maybe a misunderstanding that families don't know what to expect, and they often get it wrong of what they think it's going to be like. Is it the fact that they think it's going to be just terribly hard? And yes, it's hard, but there can be some relief or peace in it, or what is it that they just don't get about that family meeting with you when they come in?
Well, some of the families don't understand about next of kin. If
Okay,
you're married, then your spouse is the one that has the right to do the burial.
right.
If if your husband or wife is deceased, then it's your children. And I
Yep.
have people come in and they're like uncle, brother, and I'm like, no, you can't sign paperwork. You could buy
Mm,
property if you want, but
right.
you can't sign paperwork. I have to have next of kin. And then of course occasionally you get the ones that argue,
Right.
so this one doesn't want the sister on there, or this one doesn't want the brother on there, and
Sure.
then it's always the majority. So that there's 5 kids, at least 3 of them agree you go with those 3.
Oh, is that kind
And
of the how you have to do it, huh?
yeah, and it
Yeah.
just and I've had a couple times I've had to kick people out of my office. So
Where they just,
so I
all
had a
that.
I had a young man who committed suicide, and his parents came in. They were divorced. She brought her sister in with her, and the brother-in-law, and they were like arguing with the dad. And finally, we went out and picked property. When I came back in to do paperwork, I told him, "You're going to have to wait outside because you're not next of kin. Those parents are, and I don't need you in there." So there's times when you've had to kick them out, you know. So, and I've had people screaming and yelling in the cemetery at each other, and you know, so.
Yeah. Okay, so that's an important thing for people to know is, okay, if you're the kind of the order of next of kin, how it goes, right?
Right, and if you don't have any family, I mean, I don't know how many people have come in here and they're like their husbands died, they don't have any children, they don't, and I'm like, you need to have somebody to have a power of attorney, because if you don't, your stuff's going to go into probate and you're going to become a public administrator case. You know, if you don't have anything in writing, you're going to go to the county, you know. So, and then they're going to try to find your family.
Right.
So, but it's so sad to see so many people. And that's how I was with my friend Roger. He didn't have any family. I was like his daughter. He left everything to me. I took care of all of his arrangements. We knew each other over 25 years. So
but he had done the paperwork to make that
right. We had, matter of fact, my friend Mike Steen and my other friend Brian signed that witnessed the durable power of attorney, and then he wrote a simple will out. And you know, so. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize the chain of command, the next of kin, you know. So
right. So. You sound like a realtor when you talk about going out and showing property, right?
Yeah.
And in the real estate world, they say location. Is that true?
Yeah, I've had people I've had people in real estate come in and go, "Oh, it's the location, right?" Because like the highest point of the park is Park Vista. It's completely sold out. We're down to 200 or 300 spots left for burial, and we're no longer selling any pre-need because we don't have enough inventory to sell.
Okay.
So I only have 2 small areas that I can show, and then they always are like, you know, is there anything else? Well, no, this is it, you know.
Right.
And if they don't like it, I mean, you know, then it's like, well, you know, you can go to another cemetery, but most people do not want to pay those prices. Because our price break is at like 6,700. The next jump is 15 to 20,000.
Is that right?
So yeah, because Ascension's down the street is about 12 to 15, and I think Fairhaven's at 20 or 25.
$20,000 or $25,000 at Fairhaven.
And of course, Pacific View. Yep, 20 to 25.
Okay. And then what's Pacific View ballpark?
65. I ran into my old sales manager here a couple of years ago at Costco, and I said, so what are you going for there? And he goes, 65,000, and I was like, holy moly! I think they still have some stuff that's in the 40 to 45,000 range, but
are there people who buy them in advance and can flip them? Is that a thing?
Yeah, they can, but they only go up a little bit in value, and the cemeteries won't buy them back. Now, we'll buy them back, but we'll buy them back for half of the current value. So if you bought a grave in 1980 for $100, it might be worth $4,600 now. So it's a little bit of an income. So, but we're no longer sell pre-need anymore. So that's another job that I've taken on, is if I have families call in and say they want to get rid of their property because they've moved out of state or they've decided they want to be cremated and scattered or whatever, then I have a list of families that want to buy a grave. And so we kind of connect them. So we can't get involved in their negotiation. They tell me what they want, and then they go from there. They just pay me a $200 transfer fee to reissue the certificate to them.
Okay.
So, but I make no money off of that, no commission, no anything. And that's what I like working for the county, because I'm not a commissioned employee.
Right. That you don't have that extra layer of thing that you're having to figure out in your head of how do I make more on this one.
And I've had families try to give me money, and I'm like, nope, I work for the county. I do this because this is what I do, you know? Yep. So it just makes me happy that, you know.
Talk to us about the graves. How deep, how many can go in one grave?
Everything that we sell is for 2. Okay. So when we sell a grave, it's one price, but it'll hold 2 burials.
Okay.
First burial goes down 8 feet. Okay. And then when the second one comes, they leave about a foot of dirt, and the next one goes on top. And then we do have some that, you know, we could do 2 burials. we could also put a cremation or 2 cremations on top, or we could go down 8 feet for the first one, and then 2 to 4 cremations on top. It's kind of been, we're kind of.
So you can do because urns are smaller, they can do multiple cremations.
Right. Well, they go into an urn vault that's 10 by 12 by 14 inches.
So it's whatever size the vault.
So we could put up to 4 of those urn vaults in a full-size casket spot.
Got it. Okay.
So, and we have some families like that. Like mom wants to be buried, but the rest of the family wants to be cremated.
Yeah. Stories of people wanting to be buried with their pet. Do they sneak their pet's urn into the casket with them? Things like that.
Yeah, it's not allowed, but I have worked in the thing where we've been like, we're going to turn our back, and whatever you put in the casket, we don't know about,
Right.
So,
yeah.
I've had people put, bottles of champagne in the casket and, and other stuff. So, I mean, if we don't know about it,
Right.
So, I mean, I had heard the gentleman that trained Benji, the dog. He was a dog trainer for the industry.
Yep.
That years later, we found out that he has several of his dog's urns in his casket. So, and supposedly Forest Lawn didn't know anything about it, but I'm sure they did. But but we have found in the park, they have found where people have sprinkled ashes around trees, where they've seen ashes around their vases. So we did find an urn out there one day. It was just like out on the ground, so we don't know where they scattered. It was somebody's urn. It had the mortuary on it. They just left the urn laying out there. We don't know where they scattered it at.
So it was like they scattered the ashes and then just left an empty urn.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't pick the urn up and take it with them. So when I worked in cremation, I'd have a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go there." Well, really, you have to have a permit to scatter. So I used to tell people, don't take mom down to the end of the pier and just pitch her, because
tell people, what are the laws? What are the laws offhand?
Well, I think it's more of like a littering kind of a thing that you would get now. But I had somebody that was going to go up to the Kern River, and I told her, I said, if you're going to do that, make sure you take that metal tag off of the bag, because that tag is the ID tag for those cremains. So I said, you don't want Parks and Rec to come back and go, did you dump something in our river? So so and here we do more burials than cremation, because we have a huge Muslim community. We have a huge Middle Eastern community. So they don't believe in cremation. So a lot of our Hispanic families don't believe in cremation. So
and is that probably a lot of them tied to the Catholic roots, probably? Because I know Catholicism.
Yeah, I think so. Because I do have some, of our Hispanic families that will cremate, but mostly burial. So
what percentage of folks do you think come and visit their loved ones at the cemetery?
Well, you see. Every once in a while you'll see somebody that they make a big deal about where the grave is or the location is, and then you never see them again. Yeah. We have some that are here all the time. Really? I have a few family members that are here that, they've lost a daughter or lost a wife or whatever. They've been coming every day.
Really? There are people there daily.
Yeah. I have some that are here daily. So, and some.
What do you think of that? What do you think of that?
Well, I have one gentleman that's here twice a day. And when I first started here, I opened up my big mouth and said to him, there are grief groups out there that you could go to. And he looked at me and said, when you lose your daughter, you'll think about that. And so I thought, I'm never going to say that to anybody again.
No.
So it was one of those, I just stuck my foot in my mouth. So.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to help. I mean, I see the pain that he's in, but he's here every day, and it's become an obsession, so.
Yeah.
But, there's some that are here all the time and some that are, not. So, I had one lady that she was quite upset. Her husband was dying. I don't think she was really ready to let go. He was in his 40s. Her son was in a wheelchair. She made such a big deal about, she wanted something close to the curb. Her son drove, but he was in a wheelchair, wanted something close access. We put her headstone down. We put her vase down. I've never seen either one of them come back to visit. And they've been here, probably 7 or 8 years now. So, because I've been here almost 9. So, but and but there's each culture is different too. I mean, some of the Chinese have such superstition about death. They're not allowed to touch the urn. They're not allowed to touch the casket. So
okay, wow.
So those, sometimes I don't see those a lot, and then others I see they're here all the time. So
yep.
I think it's a personal preference. So
it seems like East Coast, there's a lot more size, it's larger, like the old idea of the tombstone and the headstone, and a lot of just now markers. What's your experience with that?
Well, everything here has to be flat, has to be flush to the ground, because as a county entity, we're not allowed to allow them to do upright monuments anymore. We're not allowed to build buildings, like we can't build mausoleums. We can build outdoor niches.
Yeah.
But there is that we can't. I have people ask all the time, can I do an upright? Can I do a bench? Well, benches have been sold out since 2014 because we don't have the space for them. They take up 2 burial spots.
So, they do. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Okay.
But the big headstones, of course, they have to be, the guys mow around them, but then they have to weed whack around them. So it's a maintenance thing too.
Right.
So, but they are beautiful. I mean,
they really
I spent a whole day in Highgate Cemetery in London and just loved. There's the east side and the west side, and I spent the whole day, with a friend that I've met through the internet that was a death hag. Yeah. She lived in London, and she took the train in, and we spent the whole day there. And it's amazing, the monuments that they have.
I bet. And old, right?
Very old. And then there was the very new. I mean, George Michael's was in one of the cemeteries.
Oh,
there,
wow. Yeah.
So, but they're beautiful monuments, And I spent hours inside the Westminster Abbey. We're going back to, my husband and I are going to London and Paris in April. So
that's great. Yeah.
So that's my thing. I want to go see Jim Morrison at Pierre Lachaise. So
love that. Yeah. What the term used to be cemetery. Now we're hearing, like, you guys, were you ever called El Toro Cemetery? And did it change?
I believe they were years ago. This used to be El Toro, and then I guess in the 80s they industrialized it or whatever and called it Lake Forest. So I see in the system there's some of the old cemetery records where people have El Toro as their city in there, and I know it's Lake Forest now. So Forest Lawn is the one in Glendale, is the one that started the Memorial Park tradition, where they're flat monuments and
Okay.
So he's the one, because he wanted to have people come and memorialize their families. And that's how I think the Memorial Park started. But there's still a lot of them out there called cemeteries. So,
And I just wondered if cemetery, again, you think of scary movies, you think of spooky, you think of ghosts, and then park, right? It feels like someplace you're going to visit more often. And like you said, you're going to have flat, more grassy areas, walk, play, right? Versus walking among a walk among the tombstones. Very different vibe, right?
Yeah. Huh. It's like Hollywood Forever. I mean, he still allows uprights there. They've got big, huge monuments, and but he has the crew that can trim all of that, and
Well, so, I'm sure their price point also probably.
Yeah, that I've known Tyler since he bought that cemetery, and so when he came in, him and his brother bought the cemetery. They brought investors in, and the investors helped them build the cemetery back up. And I was out there before it was taken back because the gentleman that owned the cemetery got into the endowment fund and spent all that money racing the ponies.
Really?
There was no endowment fund left when he died. So there was no money for the upkeep of the park.
Wow.
And so the state came in and seized it and put it up for auction, and Tyler and his brother bought it. And he came from St. Louis from a mortuary cemetery family. And so him and his brother bought the park, and they brought it back up to his grandeur. And, he's done great things out there. He's got movies in the park. He's got, the Day of the Dead, the Deus des Mortis has become a huge thing. And, he does events there. He allows movies to be filmed there and TV shows. And every once in a while you see something, you go, oh, that's Hollywood Forever.
Right. So, wow.
But we had film crews here too, but they're mostly like students, or we had a Japanese film crew that was filming some part of a horror movie in the back. So, they're usually only here for a day or so and gone. So, but Tyler's the one that really started the kiosk where you could go in and tape about your life, and then you could, once you pass, you could go in and look at the person talking on the kiosk. So that's kind of how the DVD kind of memorialization, I think, started with Tyler.
Really?
So
if somebody would do like a pre-need before they died, they would go in and they would get recorded.
Right.
And then what?
My friend Steve Goldstein has property there, and he went in. He was one of the first ones that went in and recorded a whole video, and you could go look it up on. Well, you can look it up on their website now. So, but you can go on his website and find people and watch their video. So there's just so much been done because, as you know, funerals have changed over the years.
Sure have.
They really have. I mean, you have so many people that come in and they go, "Well, I'm not really religious, or I'm not really spiritual," or
Right.
That's why when I got ordained, it was like, that's what I wanted to do, was to be able to go do a service where not necessarily had to be a minister to do it. So I mean, I can read the Lord's Prayer or whatever I need to do, but
yeah, you didn't want to have to do a sermon on heaven and hell and
I never forget my grandmother's funeral, because this is the first time I ever went to a funeral. I was 24 years old, and my aunt had gotten somebody to speak at her funeral, and she's a Jehovah's Witness. Well, my dad's family was quite, that we were like the Baptist, and then there was the Protestants and the Pentecostals and the Jehovah's Witnesses, and we used to tease that my grandmother was whatever religion, whatever family was visiting, So my cousin, my aunt had a Jehovah's Witness minister, and some of the stuff that was being said, I was like, what? Because their teachings are different than the King James version,
Yeah.
And the one thing I remember is when we were at graveside, and the brother said, the song "He has the whole world in his hands" means the devil has the whole world in his hands. And I'm like, that's kind of a weird interpretation,
That is.
But they're just,
No. Because I'm such a fan of obviously doing celebrations of life, helping people remember, helping people own their grief and their loss and embrace it and learn to live with grief, not get over it, not feel like it's something that's wrong with them. I love anything that's helping us memorialize, honor, remember, normalize. So, whether it's a kiosk or talking tombstones or video, I just I want to see more and more of us trying to humanize it and make it a more normal, talked about part of the journey of life, right?
Because it's a conversation people don't like to have.
Right.
We've had families come in here and say, "Oh, my mom bought cemetery property here, but we buried her at Rose Hills." Well, and I always tell families when they come in, when they pre-buy, go home and tell your kids, because they don't tell their children, then they don't know what to do. And then they're going through their stuff months later and they find out, oh, they had cemetery property here.
Wow. And yet they've already been buried somewhere else, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's like, go home and tell you. They may not want to hear it, or at least put it in writing in your trust that this is where I want to be buried.
Yeah.
It just, I know when my dad was sick, it was Easter Sunday. It was also his birthday. And he said, "I want to talk to you guys about my cremation." And my sister got up and left the room. She left the house. Wow. She did not want to talk about it. So, I know everybody's different about death.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
I was in the industry, so it didn't bother me. And I knew Dad wanted to be cremated. So, my dad was just worried that my mom would not cremate him. He even tried to get me to sign a power of attorney. And I'm like, we're not going against Mom. Yeah. So, but she cremated him like he asked. So,
how have you, from 28, stumbling upon, looking for Marilyn Monroe, or finding her, I guess, how has your own views of death, life, what has this journey taught you about the importance of this life, and then maybe even your own wishes of how you would want to be remembered and also buried, or
Yeah.
interred?
Well, I'm not afraid of it anymore. I mean, when I first started doing this grading thing, I just, I was kind of, like I said, I didn't like going into mausoleums. Some of my friends, we had some of our dinners at Hollywood Forever, and I didn't like walking outside to the graves and stuff. But it's like my dad always said, it's the living you got to worry about. It's not the dead. And so I'm not scared. I'm not fearful of it anymore. And I
Right.
have told my husband, we have a grave here at El Toro. He wants to be cremated. And we have this thing that we've said, well, you're going to go before me, so I'll just keep your urn at home, and the girls can put you in my casket, and we pay for one opening closing, and we just do one service.
Right.
But I want to be buried in an Orthodox casket, which is just a basic wood casket.
Okay.
And I'd like to have a bottomless vault, because then the casket touches the earth. That's what we do for our Muslim families and our Jewish families.
Nice.
And the Bible says ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I don't need to I don't want to be embalmed. It's like comb my hair, put me in some clothes, and put me in a casket.
Yeah.
And I'm like, my grandmother did not want to be seen. She hated that. She said every time she'd go to a funeral, people would stand over the casket and say, oh, don't they look beautiful? Don't they look peaceful? They look like they're sleeping. And she goes, I don't want people standing over me doing that.
Yeah. Right. That's weird.
So she had a closed casket. So, but
it also, there's a term, I know what it means, but for people maybe not in California who will be watching or listening, when you say the word vault, what does that mean? And what's a vault?
Yeah, a vault it's an outer container that the casket goes into a concrete vault, and then we bury the concrete vault. And I do know some states don't use them anymore.
Yeah. So. Why does California use vaults?
It's for stability of the ground, and it has to do with the OSHA. Because I mean, it will crush the casket, the weight of the dirt.
Got it.
So eventually, so it kind of protects the casket, and also if you don't put a vault in the ground could start, settling. So we have pockets and divots, and so we've always used vaults here.
Right,
so
right.
We had issues during COVID. We couldn't get vaults fast enough because concrete couldn't dry fast enough. That's how many burials we were doing.
Oh, wow.
So we did a few Muslim families. We allowed them we had them sign an affidavit that we were going to put their casket in the ground without a vault. And then we also purchased plastic vaults. They have a lifetime guarantee. So, but we're not in the business of digging people back up. So
right.
People are like, oh, it has a lifetime guarantee. It's like, but we're not going to dig it up and see if it's still broken or if it's fine.
Right.
So
have you ever witnessed where somebody's been, what is it called, disinterred or uninterred or
disinter? Yeah,
disinterred, because the word internment is to enter.
to put in and disinter. Yeah.
Okay. Have you witnessed one of those?
No, I have not. When I first came to work here, they had one that they did in the back, and our lead worker came in. He's the supervisor of the ground crew. Came in and he's like showing me pictures, and I'm like, no, and it was a skeleton, and it was like, wow, I'm not an embalmer. That's not what
Right. That wasn't why. Yeah.
And we had a crime case that the Orange County Sheriff Department's doing a bunch of cold cases, and they disinterred him, and he was just in a box. And so they brought it back for us to rebury, and they set it in my office, and it was just in a banker's box. And I looked at my coworker, and he's been in the industry for a while. I go, what's it? He goes, it's just his skull and this and that. I go, can we put it in the vault out? Because we have a fireproof vault. Can we put it in the fireproof vault? Do not leave it in my office.
The person was in the banker's box in your office.
Yeah, because that's what they found when they found his remains. So the Orange County Sheriff's Department said they can get a 50-50 hit on the DNA of the bones. Whoa. So they were able to get a hit and find out who he was. So, but they've been working a lot of cold cases out here lately. So this DNA thing is really they've solved about 4 of them out here. So they're going from cemetery to cemetery and pulling Jane Does and John Does up. So,
wow.
But
Are you allowed to say any famous people that are buried there, or is that confidential?
No, no, I could tell you. We have our most famous is FloJo, Florence Joyner, the
Okay.
Olympic
Yep.
runner.
Olympic. Yeah, she was an amazing
Yeah,
athlete. Yep.
my boss was the one that handled the service when Al
Okay.
Joyner came out, and his
Yep.
daughter, the daughter was only 7 years old. Mary was little then.
Wow.
So, and then we have Gordon Jump, the actor from WKRP Cincinnati, also was
Yep.
the Maytag man. He's
Okay.
buried here. I have a couple of other actors and actresses, and
Yeah.
we have a brigadier
Yep.
general that uh, was a consultant on the Sands of Iwo Jima, the John Wayne movie.
Yeah.
He
Sure.
was like a consultant on that.
Huh.
So I have an animator. We have a
Yeah.
couple of congressmen. So you know, I had a
Yeah.
football player that came in during COVID. And
Mm.
it was funny because the daughter and the daughters and the wife were so tall.
Were
And
they?
so they told me the NFL was going to pay for the burial. So I went to go talk to the boss and I go, the NFL, the basketball team's going to pay for that. And my general manager goes, honey, NFL's football. And I'm like, well, how would I
Right.
know? I'm not the
Right.
sports fan. My
No,
husband is.
you're a graver.
Yeah, it's like so he's always teased me about the NFL and the basketball. I'm like, because they
Okay.
were just so tall. It was like I
Yes,
thought he was
sweetheart.
basketball.
That's called the NBA.
Yeah, well, NBA, NFL, whatever. I'm like,
I know. I know. I just laugh
my
because anyone
my
who knows.
husband's the sports fan. He's the
Yeah.
baseball and the football fan. So
Does he think you're nuts for all this stuff, or does he?
no, he embraced this when we first met. He embraced this. He would
All
go
right.
out with me with camera, and sometimes he'd just sit in the car, or he'd want to. So, and every once in a while we go somewhere. He goes, "Well, I want to see too." So we
Oh,
went out to Phoenix for my niece's wedding, and I met up with one of my gravers that graving death hag friends that lives there. We met for breakfast, and she goes, Waylon Jennings is buried here at the cemetery. I go, really? So Ron looks at me and he goes, we got to go do that before we leave. So we went and found
wow.
Waylon Jennings' grave in the cemetery there. So
You converted him, man. That's
well, and
incredible.
I kind of booked my vacations around it too. When we traveled to Texas for 2 weeks, we made stops. We went up into Amarillo, and I wanted to stop in Lubbock because that's where Buddy Holly is. Well,
Okay.
beknownst to me, Mac Davis was also there. And when I started playing guitar at 14 years old, the
Yeah.
Buddy Holly songs were the first songs that they taught us.
Wow.
And then I got an Ovation guitar, which is like a fiberglass rounded guitar. And that's what Mac Davis played. And I always loved his guitar. Him and Glenn Campbell played the same guitar, and I just liked the way it sounded. So
Yeah.
I felt like I had kinship there between Buddy Holly and Mac Davis, and they're buried just, maybe 100 feet from each other.
Fascinating.
So
It really is through death. What I'm hearing is even through death and visiting others who've died, like you do through doing graving, our story and their stories really do intersect, right? And
yeah,
it helps us find our place in the world by remembering and acknowledging those who've gone ahead of us.
right,
Oh,
true.
it's really
No.
something. I have at least one more question. Is if somebody's interested in getting into this work, um, maybe they don't want to do the embalming thing either, like you didn't, but they just want to get involved. Are there some natural next steps or things that they should look to do for?
Well, there's a lot of mortuaries out there and small cemeteries that tend to hire people that don't have any experience in the business. The
Give
only thing
people a
that I can
chance.
tell you is that you need to have some compassion.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. I've called mortuaries where I've had snotty people on the phone, and I'm like, I chewed one lady down up one side and down the other, and I said, if I talk to my families the way you're talking to me, I wouldn't have a job.
Yeah.
You know, so I just think if you're compassionate enough, and I mean, there's a lot of administrative jobs out there. A lot of the SCI facilities and Rose Hills, they start them as funeral directors. So they go out and they stand services, or they stand visitations, or
Yeah.
and then they work up from there. So,
Yeah.
but a lot of the embalmers are now like I've seen quite a few of the embalmers that I worked with at Pacific View and Westminster that went on to be arrangers. And there's one gal over at Pacific View that was an arranger, and then she's become a family service counselor. So
Well,
I
yeah.
just think, this is where my passion was. I wanted to work with the families, and so I started in the office end of it and worked
Yeah.
my way in. So,
Yeah. Interesting.
uh,
Well,
and
what
I
would
don't
be
think
it?
I don't have an education. I mean, I'm a high school graduate with some college, and I don't have
Yeah.
an education that
Yeah.
a business background or whatever. So, but I've
Do you,
taken what classes I can and what learned what I can, and so.
do you still think you go home most every day, being able to just be like, wow, I had the opportunity again to hold space and be with and for these families who are grieving? And is that how rewarding is that for you?
It is rewarding. And every night I come home, my husband goes, "Okay, so what happened today?" Because
Yeah.
he enjoys hearing that, it's like, I mean, you don't want to go home and tell people stories, but, there are times that I had one day that I had two families walk in that lost babies. And one of them lived to be 3 months old and died and never made it home, never made it out of NICU unit. And
Yeah.
then the other one was born with the cord around the neck. So he took a breath and passed.
Yeah.
And I was at Costco and I started to go back home and I had to pull over on the side of the road because it just broke my heart that those two babies are never going to know the kind of life that any a close relationship with one of the families. I see them here
Right.
all the time, and she just recently had another baby.
Wow.
So that was I saw her with the baby bump, and I was so excited for them. So,
Yeah.
but those kind of things, it's like, then there's days I go home, I'm okay. And there's days that, I just want to sit down and cry, so
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot.
that,
Yeah.
and, grief comes in waves, just like, with my
Yeah.
mom. There was one night I went home, I got ready to go to bed. I sat down on the side of the bed and I just fell apart.
Yeah.
So,
Do you give yourself permission to be able to do that when you're at home and a wave of grief?
yeah, I try to. And my husband has been, he lost both of his parents before I lost mine. And I've just, his dad died 3 weeks after my dad died.
Mm.
And that was his last connection because his mother died when she was 60. So, but he's been great. He's just, he keeps asking me, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So, but he's given me room to,
Yeah.
but we all grieve differently. My sister holds it in and I'm more of a, let's get it out. Let's, but it's been difficult with my mom. So,
Yeah.
moms are our rocks, so.
They are. For the moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
Kim, this has been enlightening, fun, energizing. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your experience and some of your story and passion and interest with our viewers and listeners.
well, thank you for having me. So,
Yeah, yeah. And hey, for people that are listening and or viewing, and if you're in the Orange County area, get over there to El Toro Memorial Park. It's on Trabuco, right?
correct.
Yeah, on Trabuco, and pop by and see Kim. Have her take you on a tour of the property. Sure.
I have so many drop-ins every once in a while. I have somebody come in that I know. It's like, I was in the area. So,
Okay. All right. Well, Kim, thanks so much. We'll see you down the road, and
okay.
we'll continue to be in touch and encourage one another in this beautiful work we get to do. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, for all of you watching,